Lincoln, too tall for the White House? Abraham Lincoln stood at an impressive 6 foot 4 inches, about 193 centimeters. Back in the 1800s, that was giant. So giant, in fact, that people say he constantly hit his head on White House doorframes and windows. Staff joked about reinforcing the frames, while Lincoln himself laughed it off. The President of the United States, battling war, politics, and low ceilings. Even legends sometimes have tall problems. Lincoln's courtroom comedy win. Young Abraham Lincoln stood in court, defending his client with sharp wit. At one point, he turned to a witness and said, "You saw that? From that distance? In that darkness? Sir, are you an owl?" The courtroom erupted in laughter. The witness stumbled, lost for words. The jury? Completely won over. Lincoln didn't just argue, he entertained. And of course, he won the case. This wasn't just law. This was Lincoln's way, using humor as a weapon for truth. Lincoln, a man who risked everything. Before his tragic assassination, Abraham Lincoln had already faced death. On his way to Washington before taking office, an assassination plot was uncovered. He traveled secretly by train at night, in disguise, under tight security. But that wasn't the only time. Southern extremists targeted him multiple times. Gunshots were fired during one of his public speeches. Still, Lincoln refused to hide. He believed, if my life must be given for this country, so be it. And he stood tall, no matter the danger. Lincoln, the duel that almost was. Young Abraham Lincoln once came this close to a deadly duel. Angered by a political insult, he agreed to face his rival in a duel, and chose his weapon, the long sword. Why? Because he was tall, over 6 feet 4, and skilled with a blade. It gave him a massive advantage. Just before things turned bloody, a mediator stepped in and stopped it. But the legend remains. What if no one had stopped him? The future president, ready to draw blood over an insult. Hard to imagine, right? Lincoln, the second assassin? A hidden mystery behind Lincoln's death. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth, the nation was shocked. But some witnesses claimed Booth wasn't alone. Rumors swirled of a second man, another figure spotted fleeing the scene. Documents were lost, testimonies buried, and suspects disappeared. Even today, historians debate if Lincoln's murder was part of a larger conspiracy. Was Booth really acting alone, or was he just the frontman for something darker? Did Lincoln really talk to ghosts? President Abraham Lincoln had a side many don't know. While living in the White House, he lost his beloved son Willie to illness. Grief overwhelmed both him and his wife, Mary. They began hosting seances, rituals to contact the dead. Mediums were invited night after night, and Mary claimed she spoke to Willie's spirit. Lincoln himself reportedly said, "I saw a ghost in the White House." Did Lincoln truly speak with spirits? Or were his visions shaped by sorrow too deep to bear? The love that shattered Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln wasn't always the unshakable leader we remember. In his youth, he fell deeply in love with a woman named Anne Rutledge. But before their love could blossom, and tragically died of typhoid fever. Lincoln was devastated. He withdrew from the world, slipping into a deep depression. Some say he even considered ending his own life. It was a grief that haunted him for years, a reminder that even great men carry deep scars. The Lincoln's private war, behind closed doors. Many admire Abraham Lincoln for his leadership, but few know how stormy his personal life could be. Lincoln's marriage to Mary Todd was often a battlefield. During their worst years, their home echoed with yelling, and even flying dishes. Friends and neighbors reportedly heard the chaos from outside. Mary was brilliant but had a fiery temper, and Lincoln wasn't always calm in return. Their love endured, but not without sparks, and broken porcelain. Even the greats had stormy nights at home. Lincoln, a romantic scandal from the past. Even Abraham Lincoln had his share of romantic drama. He was engaged to Mary Todd, but just before the wedding, he called it off. Some say it was cold feet, others blamed the pressure and Lincoln's own doubts. Mary was furious. Friends and family were stunned. But a year later, against all odds, they got back together and finally married. It sounds like a 19th century soap opera. But maybe this heartbreak helped shape the Lincoln who would one day carry the weight of a nation. Lincoln, barehanded hero, young Lincoln vs. the thieves. Before he was a president, Abraham Lincoln was a living legend. In his youth, working in a small rural town, something wild happened. A group of thieves tried to raid the village. But Lincoln didn't run. He stood his ground alone. With nothing but his bare hands, he confronted the robbers. And sent them packing. No guns. No backup. Just raw courage and strength. This wasn't a myth. It's a story locals passed down for generations. Before leading a nation, he protected his neighbors, fists clenched, heart steady. That's the Lincoln they don't teach you about in school.